How's it, everybody? Welcome to the first episode of the Happy to Be Here podcast. My name is Josh. I'm your host. And Happy to Be Here is a podcast dedicated to asking the questions our generation is currently wrestling with about life, faith, and mental health, and finding honest answers together. So today, for our first episode, we have our first guest, Johan Bester. He is a qualified counselor, founder of Bester Inc., a private practice that has supported over 200 clients, sought after for blending insight, empathy, and practical vision. Whether he's mentoring individuals, building teams, or speaking on a stage, Johan's passion is helping people rediscover purpose and align their work and lives with what truly matters. Awesome, Johan. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Josh, for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too as well. So, I'd love for us if we could get to know you a bit better, especially for everyone that's watching. So, can you kind of give us a little insight? What first got you into counseling?
Well, I think it's innate gifting. You know, when you're always attracting people with issues and problems, then you generally end up soliciting advice, giving advice and helping. And so, that was just one of the things that God kind of blessed me with. And so then you end up, thinking, how much are you going to help people? And so that created the platform, and then obviously went into ministry. And ministry and counseling is pretty much synonymous. That's what you do as a pastor, especially. And so, I ended up doing that, and eventually created a bit of a database of people that would come to me from all walks of life, and gave me a good platform, and obviously a ton of experience to work from. And also studied a little bit, it helps. And so, today I'm here, and I'm your guest. So
Amazing. Awesome.
Let's go for it.
Cool. So our first question I wanted to ask you about, how do you find faith and your area of expertise, which is, counseling, worked and kind of meshed together?
Well, I think it's important to firstly understand that, we can pray for people. People need prayer, especially. You have to acknowledge Holy Spirit's presence and the fact that He is actually in the meeting or in the counseling room with you and your client. And so when it comes to faith, it's also that belief that whatever God puts on your heart, and when you share that with somebody, that will break something open for them. So yes, you have to have a very, very narrow, close walk with God. You don't have to be a superhuman being, obviously. We're all fallible. But you have to have that trust that when you go into the counseling room and when you solicit your advice and when you give people some direction, that you actually heard God. And that also comes from a place of obviously prayer, understanding the word, having some grounding in you. You're not shooting from the hip, as it were, but that you can trust what you heard in your heart. So it is also to know God's voice, to be familiar with His voice, that when He speaks and when He directs you, that you can speak in confidence to help people. So that definitely gives you a good platform to operate from.
Awesome stuff. And then how do you think we can balance acknowledging real mental health struggles with not letting them define you?
Sure. Mental health, even as I was preparing for this interview, I went through my notes again. And if you look at the world today, mental health is a real issue. And it's really a problem. And you can see it across the board. Countries, nations, people groups, everybody's struggling with it. How we define it, though, is actually the crux of the matter. And so how people see how people see life, how they see their challenges, how they face their challenges, is always a nice little bit of a mirror to see what your mental health is actually all about. Mental health and mental wellness are actually two different things. Mental wellness is the way you think. How do you think about yourself? How do you think about the world? And that mental wellness is then impacted by your mental health. And mental health is, again, impacted by what you're exposing yourself to. So if you're exposing yourself to a tremendous amount of Instagram and Facebook and YouTube clips, and you are living in a life of isolation. It's just you and your phone. And we know that in itself is a pandemic at the moment. They actually call it nomophobia, the fear of being away from your phone and your device. That definitely will have an impact on your mental health. And how that then manifests itself is in your mental wellness. How can I actually express myself properly? You know, how can I actually put a sentence together and actually come across as intelligent? Can I actually define my issue properly? Can I actually talk to somebody in a coherent manner and not in an emoji or, you know, in abbreviations? And can I actually express myself in terms of what I feel? So in a world today where everybody is obviously fully aware of this, they actually have a hard time just communicating what's the problem. And as a counselor, sometimes that is a very frustrating process when you have to somehow, you know, sit down and try and create a platform for a client to say, listen, this is actually my problem. So it might take a couple of sessions even before you get there, just because people don't know how to talk anymore. I know it sounds funny, but it's really a problem.
No, definitely.
So,
yeah.
you know.
And so you would say, obviously, mental wellness and mental health being two separate issues. Would you say that is probably one of the main reasons it is such a struggle for people's lack of understanding what the difference is between the two?
Yeah, you know what? I think people are so scared of the stigma. We live in a world where everything is really cosmetic.
Yes.
People love to come across as having it together. And so when they finally admit that, listen, I've got a mental health or a mental illness issue, it's really a massive challenge. And to create a safe space, especially as a friend, a counselor, a mentor, any person in leadership, where somebody can actually sit down and say, listen, you know what, I'm really struggling with this issue. And very few people can actually correlate mental wellness issues to mental health. They can't really bring the two together. So it takes somebody that can take you by the hand and say, okay, let's unpack this and come to a place where you can understand the origin of your mental wellness issue. So yeah, it takes time. It does take time.
Yeah. I think as well, mentioning about like the mental wellness aspect, I feel like while I was listening to you share, I think it is something I have noticed as well, especially through like a lot of my generation and my peers, is we often sometimes do struggle to connect on like a, emotional level. Everything feels quite surface level. Mm-hmm. And I think, yeah, you kind of shed a little bit of light for me as well on like the difference between the two, and something I'll definitely, look into more as well. And so I'm also kind of curious, how do you think being in kind of your community and your space, how can that impact that role of being able to openly express, hey, I'm struggling in this area, my mental health kind of tanking here?
I think the most important aspect that you have to get victory over is over shame. Yeah. A lot of people struggle doesn't struggle from shame, but a lot of shame. People have shame issues in their lives, and because shame is such a thing that we really avoid, because it speaks to my strength, it speaks to my intelligence, it speaks to my ability, and we're so scared to be judged by our communities, our environments, and so once you get that breakthrough over the shame thing, to actually go to people and say, hey, you know what, I have a problem, I have a bondage, or I have a mental health issue that needs some looking or counsel. So I think the best part is to confront that shame and to realize, listen, I'm not going to allow this thing to rule my life, especially as Christians, but as just general as human beings. We cover our shame and we try to pretend to be something we're not. And people see it a mile away. People feel it. They're not conned by your bravado and all your stuff. They see, listen, man, you're hiding something. You've got a mask on, that kind of thing. And so it's really important that you sit down and find people that you can trust. People that you can share some real intimate stuff with and know that it's a safe environment. Especially people that's been traumatized in life. Now, I know trauma is a big buzzword. Everybody is a trauma counselor, but there are people out there that's really experienced some really tough stuff. And that compounds on your mental instability. It's really, if you can't share those incidents or happenings that's occurred to your life in an environment that is not safe, then shame will just kind of overtake you, and the trauma will just kind of fester, and so we have to create environments where we can first say to a person, you know what, and that's why I say to most of my clients, I say, listen, Satan is not a very creative individual. I've seen it, I've heard it all. Your story is really just another story, so you're not going to shock me. And somehow people feel, okay, fine, I can drop my guard a little bit, and now I can kind of start unpacking my life and stuff that traumas and stuff that's happened to me. And that gives them a lot of freedom. And it's in that where the mental wellness starts clicking over, and they can start getting a little bit of a grip on their life. And it's also important, Josh, to when somebody struggles with something, whatever issue that might have been, that affects their mental wellness, when you get acknowledgement, especially as a client, when you sit with a counselor and you say, but I see you, I feel you, I hear you. I'm not going to say you're nuts or crazy or like in my life, I've made some really bad decisions. Yeah. And the one thing that withheld me from seeking help was, they're going to say, you should have known. How could you? And those little feedbacks that you get that somehow diffuses that flame, as it were, to seek help, it kind of prolonged my healing. So, and I mean, I went to one of my best buds and I said, listen, this is what I did. And he says, Johan, how could you have? And you're like, yeah, but it happened, And so I think as a counselor or as a friend, the best thing is to keep the judgment for yourself, keep your poker face on and create that invitation. I mean, that's what Jesus did. He never said to somebody, hey, didn't you think? No, I didn't. Didn't you see it? No, I didn't. And so, that's definitely a very nice launch pad to step into some mental healing, as it were.
No, that's awesome. And I think as well, like you mentioned just now, trust is important. And I feel for me, kind of going into this, like I found with my journey when I was hitting kind of my low points and really struggling, I often quite like discounted my own like issues and what I was dealing with, because I found, being in the friend circles that I've been in and the friends that I have, I've kind of become the person they rely on a lot. So they kind of confide in me, and I always try and like do my best to be there for them. But then like when you hear people sharing with you like, hey bro, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm going through, you kind of sit there and you're like, dang, maybe my situation isn't as bad as theirs, and you kind of discount your own situation. So how would you say people can learn how to not like minimize their own struggle, their own pain?
Well, you have to give them some credit, and that's a really good point to make. Firstly, we don't grade pain. Whether you deal with, I mean, when Irene gave birth to our second our son, Michael Kaiser, she suffered from severe postnatal depression. And to the point that the doctor at that stage said, Johan, you keep an eye on your wife, because this is really a bad route to be on. And the one thing the worst thing you can do to somebody is to tell them that what they're feeling is imaginary, or doesn't matter, or get over it, and also not to help people from a place of your pain, as it were. Just because somebody came to you and said, listen, what you're feeling doesn't matter, doesn't mean that I can now regurgitate that and project that onto somebody else and say, hey, grow up and get over it. Sometimes people need that acknowledgement. They need to know that they're safe in your place, and you are giving them the validation that they need. And that was probably one of the biggest breakthroughs in my life, is when I actually shared a journey with an individual, and he says, yeah, Johan, that's what I experienced, and I could literally feel that breakthrough. And I'm like, my goodness, so I wasn't all nuts, Yeah. What I actually saw was real. And so even for the females listening to this that faced a little bit of a PND or a baby blue scenario, I know the older generation women say, no, You know, get up there and be strong. And it's sometimes the worst kind of help you can give people. But to acknowledge and say, you know what, I can see you're not doing well. How can I assist you? What do you need? You know, being compassionate. People know you can't fix them. I love Larry Crabb. He's a phenomenal psychologist, born-again Christian psychologist. And he says people intuitively know you can't fix them. But you creating that space allows them in, and they are then willing to share. And that puts you in the spotlight, as it were, you know, where you can say, okay, God, how am I going to affect this person's life, you know, and I can acknowledge where they're at. So yeah, it's not just something that comes naturally. Sometimes you have to work at it. But the more you practice, the easier it gets, you know, and eventually people look at you and like, hey, I can trust this guy, you know, and I know that I'm safe. And there's no shame in sharing, and especially when people come to you and say, hey, but I'm not coping. You know, that's really a bad space to be in. And then they want to know that they're not going to get judged. And so then they're free to speak. So, yeah.
Awesome. And I think as well, especially I've noticed a lot with comes regards in my generation, a lot of young men, they find it very hard to, you know, be vulnerable and express themselves. And I feel like especially in the time we're living in, how hard it is, you know, to just you know, be strong in your identity and who you are as a person. How do you feel practically as young men we can, you know, learn how to, you know, still, you know, be strong and be the pillar for the people in our lives that we need to be, but in that same thing, when we know that we're not doing well, we're struggling, be able to, you know, express ourselves and have that vulnerability?
It's a very good question. I think just by what I've seen is that we have a generation of young men between, you know, 15, 16 to about 20, 24, that's grown up in an environment where there's a lack of mentorship. You know, there's a lack of the patriarchal figure, you know, the dad or the granddad or the uncle or the leader in a community scenario can actually speak into that guy's life. And ironically, there was an experiment, well, not really an experiment, but a game ranger actually noticed a scenario which was recorded, and you can go check it out and study it out. But basically what happened was that there was this bunch of juvenile elephant bulls. So they were just kind of getting into puberty, and there weren't any male bulls around them. And so these juveniles started creating a lot of havoc. You know, they would attack the rhinos, they would destroy the trees, they were just really destructive. And the game rangers didn't know, because it was a kind of like a weird behavior amongst these elephant bulls. And they don't know what to do. You know, I mean, this juvenile is trying to mate a rhino. You know? It's not going to work, but and they just creating chaos. And so one of the park rangers actually had a brainwave, and he says, listen, let's introduce some bull elephants, just to kind of see what's going to happen. And so they introduced these bull elephants amongst these juveniles, and their behavior changed. And we need that. You know, we all need an elderly person, whether it's a male or a female, whether it's family or whether it's a friend or something out there that you can trust, and just kind of emulate them a bit and pick their brains. You know, how did you do this? What did you do? And I find that, you know, especially in this generation where boundary lines are really slack, and that's the other thing. We need guidelines. We, as human beings, we need a definitive yes and a definitive no. You know, sometimes people say no and we feel a little bit injured, but in hindsight, you're like, hey, okay, you're making sense, I can see it. And sometimes people say yes, and you're like, okay, so I'm up to it, I can do this. You know, I can be responsible and whatever. And we get this feedback from people around us that's telling us, listen, we're doing well. A couple of decades ago, families were very tight-knit groupings. You know, you even had a granddad and a grandma in the house, you know, and they would say, no, Josh, you're like your dad, and you remind me of your uncle, and you've got the trait of your mom, and you can take that information and you can somehow disseminate it into, hey, this is who I am. you know. So I'm tall and I'm lanky and I'm attractive and I'm well-spoken and this is part of my family and this is where I belong. And that gives you that grounding, you know, that solid feeling of, listen, I'm not a wishy-washy individual. I can actually make it. Now that family structure over time has been broken down. So you need to kind of look for that, you know, and for those that's fortunate enough to still have like a mom and a dad in their lives, to say, hey, speak into my life, you know. How was I when I was a baby, you know? Was I naughty? Was I funny? Was I curious? And so you glean that information and you kind of build a profile of, this is who I am. It's also important to get to know yourself. Yeah. You know, I'm a big advocate for doing some psychometric testing. You know, go online and do just a little survey. Yeah. And there's dime a dozen. All of them, most of them are free. And it gives you a little bit of a personality breakdown. And you're like, okay, so I'm not totally weird. This is actually how God created me, fearfully and wonderfully so. And then a sense of self-acceptance starts occurring. And once you can accept yourself for who you are, I think you can stand a little bit taller amongst your friends, even when stuff like mental wellness and health and the breakdown of those elements are rife. You're like, hey, if something's off kilter, I can call on somebody because I kind of know who I am. And that identity has been there. So it's really important, you know, even in biblical times, and there's the father would bless the child. Yeah. And the father would constantly be in the child's life. And sometimes I have to, even in my own son's life, I mean, you know him, I have to kind of force myself into his life, you know. And it's very easy to just kind of step out and let him do his thing. But I would do him such a disfavor. So I'd step in there and say, hey, son, I'm really proud of you. I love you. Well done, you know. The same with my daughter. And just reaffirm what they already know as a parent and as a child. And that builds their identity and it strengthens them. So it's important, as you say, amongst your friends, to say to a guy, you know, when he's acting a little bit out and you can see it, say, hey, bud, who are you? And most of them will say, well, I'm a surfer and I'm a this and I'm a that. Say, no, not what are you doing or what are you known for? Who are you? Yeah. Can you actually accurately define who you are? And you'll quickly find out very few people can. Yeah. Sometimes it's life's journey. Actually, it's a journey to figure out who are you really, and can you actually articulate that profile accurately to somebody else.
Funny enough, a story about that, we got the opportunity to go speak at one of the schools in town, and we were sharing, kind of just asking questions, getting to know the kids. And one of the questions we ended up asking them was like, if you had to strip away everything that you can link yourself to, who are you as a person? You know, what's your identity? And I think for me as well, I sat there and I was like, okay, if I'm taking away all these things that like are synonymous with who I am, if people saw me from the outside, like, okay, he surfs, he runs, or he models, you know, he does all these things, his parents run a church. If I took all these things away from who I am deeply as a person, and I think for me, my answer was, I think a lot of who I am is shaped by a lot of the experiences I've had and the encounters and the people that have been in my life and what they've left me with. And so I think, yeah, I really have noticed, especially in this season of transition, how important it is, you know, to find yourself in not alone, but like really internalizing. Because I feel like what we do often, especially as young people, is like, we finish high school, we're like, yo, we're done sick, and like, let's go into the world and let's go do all these things to figure out who I am. And oftentimes not sit with ourselves internally and say, okay, let me process this inside. Like, let me ask myself the hard questions. Let me like really dig deep and figure out who I am on the inside. So I think, yeah, I love like what you shared as well. It kind of gives me like a soundboard to, you know, kind of reverberate off. But how like I can also testament to what you're saying is very true. And so like, what are some like practical ways you think we as young people can like really ask ourselves those questions and find like who our identity is?
The worst place to try and figure out who you are is when there's like a huge amount of peer pressure around you. You know, when you want to impress the girl or you want to win the favor of the buddies and that kind of thing. And that's where a lot of students kind of crash and burn, you know. They leave home first year, they go to uni and before you know it, it's a drinking and a party culture, and they're just trying to keep up with the rest, and they have no clue as to who they are. So it's really, you need to find the right habitat, as it were, to try and figure out who you are. And it's important in that sense to look at it and say, okay, what can I practically do? Well, firstly, sometimes put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. You know, where your value system is getting challenged a bit, and you're like, okay, you know, the stuff I always believed, am I still believing that? You know, the stuff I advocated, am I still going to advocate that? That's a very, very good practical place, you know, so be uncomfortable. I also think something that's challenge yourself, you know, step out of your comfort zone and do stuff that you usually wouldn't do. And you'll quickly find out, you know, what your identity is about. Nothing bad about a bit of hardship in life, you know, to kind of just peel away the veneer of who you thought you were. So practically, I think it's important to have good open conversations with people you trust. I think it's important that you keep on learning. I think it's really, really important that you keep on reading. Buy a book, you know, Kindle, it's literally instantaneous download. Expand your horizon. Learn from other people. It's just such a constant eye-opener. It's a constant stretch for you. And sometimes to put up your hand, you know, especially when it's uncomfortable. Put up your hand and say, listen, count me in, I'm going to do this. And to show yourself, I've got the mettle to do it. It's important because people really want to just mollycoddle themselves, you know, they just pad their own cell, as it were, and they build everything according to their preferential treatment and what they want. And yeah, sure enough, I mean, we all deserve some comforts in life and some privilege, but that's not what life is about, you know. Life is really about, can I really stretch out of my world and do something else? And it's a scary place. You know, it's scary. It's not always easy to do stuff that's uncomfortable. I mean, I transitioned from being a pastor, and now I'm a real estate agent. And I'm like, oh, Lord, I'm supposed to be good with people, but not on this level. And putting a deal together, and I mean, I know business. And you are constantly stretched, but it keeps your mind growing. And combining that with learning and reading and new skill sets, it's a good start, I think. But you know what, Josh, just to hook onto that, also, like I said, if people struggle with depression, if they struggle with anxiety, suicide, you know, we are fragile people. I mean, we human beings are. Is it really important for people to be honest about it? Don't hide it away, you know. Don't sugarcoat it. Find help, get help ASAP. Speak to people that you trust. And understand that even the word of God talks about that. I want to read a scripture in Proverbs 12, verse 25. It's such a nice scripture that just it's actually Proverbs 18, verse 14. It says in the Passion Translation, it says, "The will to live sustains you when you are sick, but depression crushes courage and leaves you unable to cope." You know, and so it's not an old thing. You know, I mean, Solomon or whoever wrote that passage knew about depression. So yes, there's a limited amount of self-will to do things. But when you're in that place of depression and your mental wellness is not doing well and you are not doing well, take practical steps. And one of it, besides everything else I said, was cut down on your cell phone time. Cut down on the blue light exposure, get some vitamin D, get in the sun. You know what? Do some exercise that actually makes you sweat a bit. You know, they said if you suffer from depression, walking on the beach, breaking out in a lack-old sweat, you know, and having the muscles burn a bit is actually very good for you. You need that. Cut down toxic conversations. If you can't cope anymore, switch off the TV and, you know, put the newspaper away. Find environments that actually celebrate you and lift you up. That's really, really simple but very, very crucial stuff, especially in today's world where the generation, you and my generation for that sake, we cannot live without our phones. Our phones are becoming our little comfort blankets, you know. And if you feel lonely, you're just on your phone and you're in your own environment, and you actually forget how to express yourself and how to talk and all that kind of stuff. But that's the fuel that your depression actually runs on, you know. So it's really important to break out of that environment as much as you physically can, and start looking at a healthier way of interacting with technology and people. We need people. We're made for people, you know. So sometimes if you feel somebody is not doing well, ask them. Yeah. You know, I see you're not doing well. You know, what's up? You want to talk? Let's have a coffee. And before you know it, people very quickly will just dump. Yeah. And they feel comfortable because you asked, but you made yourself vulnerable. Yeah. So create that opportunity for people to just engage with you.
Johan, thank you so much for coming and just sharing your wealth of knowledge with us today. I really appreciate having you on.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and I really bless you, and I pray that this is just going to explode for you. So thank you, Josh.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much for coming along with us on our first official episode. It's been a really amazing conversation with Johan, sharing some insights and imparting wisdom to us. And I think if I can encourage everyone, definitely go check out Proverbs 18 verse 4. You said, verse seems like there's a lot of power in there. And well, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next week.